A new political poll has Labor ahead of National with a 7-point gain since the election.
Pressure is growing on the Prime Minister with voter support continuing to fall.
Which is reflected in the latest polls, showing the cost of living is by far the key concern of voters.
I'm not too focused on polls. I think I've seen 3 in the last 10 days.
The National Party have had a shocking term in government.
He's doing a great job focusing on the issues that matter to New Zealanders.
It's a really good coalition government. I love being part of it.
We've got every expectation that we'll do extremely well next year.
Next year is the election. So today on The Detail, with 12 months left until we go back to the polls, we look at the current state of our parliament and the political mood of the country.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
The rising cost of living.
The cost of living crisis.
The nation struggles with a worsening cost of living crisis.
The cost of living.
Those 3 words, cost of living, dominate voter sentiment.
New Zealanders are very clear about what they expect me to be doing, which is fixing the economy, and that's what we're working on.
But will Christopher Luxon even still be our Prime Minister when we next cast our votes?
Asked whether National should change their leader before the next election, almost half, 49%, said they should.
He's failed ultimately to capture the hearts and minds of the public in terms of the direction of the country. And that's showing in these data.
If you were sensible, you don't roll Luxon. Even if you think Luxon's a drag on the party, which he is, you do not roll him before the election. You do it about a year after the election.
But if he is rolled, who will replace him?
Well, I would have thought the most likely ticket, if they were to replace him, would be...
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies, and that was former political editor turned RNZ investigative journalist and host Guyon Espiner. His full answer in a moment. We'll also chat about the latest polls, how the coalition government is going, the state of Labor and the minor parties, and how Kiwis really feel about all things politics a year before the next election. We start with our political mood.
I think the mood is one of disillusionment with a lot of the political scene, frankly. And I think possibly one of the best illustrations of that is the support or lack of for the 2 major parties. I mean, often that is around about 80%, and then that last 20 is divided up, the scraps between the other smaller MMP players. At the moment, it's closer to 60%. You know, people really aren't engaging with National or Labor, and that reflects, I think, a disillusionment of where we're going. The polls back that up. You're struggling to find good numbers for people who think we're on the right track. We've obviously been struggling for a long time economically. Things like large numbers of New Zealanders heading offshore, voting with their feet is a pretty clear example of that. So, yeah, I would think there is a bit of a sense that New Zealand's a bit broken at the moment.
Where are our leaders, our opposition leaders, the parties, where are they going wrong? How can they get this right?
Well, I think you're not really seeing yet from the opposition parties a big push to show that they have new, bold, fresh ideas. Having said that, it is still early in the electoral cycle. I know we get frustrated with this, and we've just seen Labor release their first real policy.
Today we're announcing the establishment of the New Zealand Future Fund. It will be one of the cornerstone measures of our next Labor government.
People saying, oh, gee, it's taken you 2 years. But frankly, this is early. You know, if you go back and look at politics, it's not uncommon for the major opposition party to release their policies in election year and sometimes very close to the election. So Labor is front-footing that to some degree and starting to release its economic policies, and we'll see a lot of interest around the capital gains tax one soon. But to come back to your question about why people are disillusioned, perhaps, is we haven't seen a real clear alternative from the opposition. And the government, it's the first MMP government with 3 parties in the cabinet. It's very difficult for them to position themselves to get a unified position because of that, and because of the strong personalities involved, with Winston Peters and David Seymour especially, you know, giving Chris Luxon a real sort of run for his money there. So they're struggling a little bit to present a unified, coherent vision of where New Zealand is going. That would be my assessment of why people aren't terribly enthusiastic about our politics at the moment.
It's been a bad weeks or months really for Christopher Luxon, particularly when it comes to popularity, and there are whispers he may be rolled. Do you believe that?
Yes, I do. I believe that he has a problem. And I think it's a serious discussion that people are having. And I would say that is because of the poor reception that he has had as Prime Minister, frankly. His numbers for his party are dreadful.
The latest post-freshwater strategy poll has Labor at 34% and National back at 32%. Now, that is a drop of 6 points since they took over in late 2023.
To have a party, a dominant governing leading party in government in the early 30s is unheard of, really, in the modern era. They are appalling numbers, and his personal ratings on the preferred Prime Minister stakes are dreadful as well.
Labor's Chris Hipkins is also ahead of National's Christopher Luxon in the preferred Prime Minister stakes, 43% to his 37%.
I mean, he's level or sometimes behind Chris Hipkins, who was turfed out of government ignominiously in 2023. So to be behind or level with Labor at this point is a real problem, and he's struggling to connect, and he's struggling to make those gains. And so there is a serious possibility that they could move against him.
So who could replace him? Well, here are the results from a recent poll on Stuff.
Chris Bishop is the runaway winner with 16% support, followed by Erica Stanford on 12% and Nicola Willis on 11%.
I just want to be a popular candidate for the Minister of Education, if I'm honest with you.
Polls bounce around a bit. The ultimate poll that matters is the one late next year in 2026, and it's just head down, bum up until then.
OK, big question now. Who would you replace him with?
Well, I would have thought the most likely ticket, if they were to replace him, would be Erica Stanford as leader and Chris Bishop as finance and deputy, and make that combination. Look, I mean, you could configure it any number of ways, but she is obviously, in most people's books, when you look at commentators and people who follow these things closely, one of the standout ministers.
I've said it before and I will say it again. Erica Stanford is this government's MVP, most valuable player.
And possibly someone who could engage with New Zealand at a level that could see them rising into the 40s. Because the other thing you have to remember is, yes, it's quite possible that Christopher Luxon hangs on. It's possible the economy turns and that he can ride some of the crest of that wave back into office in 2026. But if that's with a National Party sort of in the mid-30s or something, that is going to be a repeat of this term. So to build a really strong legacy and a successful Prime Ministership, it's a lot easier to do if you're in the mid-40s or where John Key was. He was in around the 47 sort of mark, and the smaller parties at that point were add-ons, nice to haves. He could go over to ACT on the right, he could go to the Māori Party on the left. He even had a memorandum of understanding with the Green Party. He had Peter Dunn in the centre, so he could tack left, right and centre, but behind it all was a coherent, lucid vision of what the National-led government wanted to achieve. Partly because he doesn't have enough strength in numbers, Christopher Luxon, and also because of a limited amount of experience. It's not criticism, it's just fact. He hasn't been in politics that long, whereas Winston Peters came into Parliament in 1978, and David Seymour is a real skilled political operator. No matter what you think of his politics, if you love him or hate him, he's very good at it. And so it's making it really difficult for Chris Luxon to actually have National's brand shine through.
And allow him to shine, because like you say, his right-hand man and his left-hand man are both formidable people. Is that part of the problem, or is there just something unlikable about him?
Yeah, I mean, he clearly hasn't resonated that well with people. I mean, you see him, and I've seen him a little bit, you probably have too, when he's out on the campaign trail, and he seems to engage pretty well with people.
He does.
He's very personable, but that doesn't seem to be cutting through with the electorate. That's what the polling numbers tell us. And also, there's a wily political strategy skill that can actually supplant the actual raw facts of the numbers. If you look back at the Helen Clark administration, for example, which led from 1999 to 2008, she ran minority governments, so she was never any higher than 39%. But she had incredible political skills. She had been in Parliament since, 1981 when she took over, so that was 18 years worth before she became Premier. And she had that skill of manoeuvring things and using the Prime Ministership in that way. Like just coming out and rolling over her coalition partner and talking to the media first and saying, not saying explicitly, but the challenge being, and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
You know, and so we haven't seen that sort of poker playing from Chris Luxon, and it doesn't look like that's in his mix. He's running it a bit more like a CEO. He delegates. You know, you saw him delegate the position on Palestinian statehood to Winston Peters. Okay, he's foreign minister, but I can't imagine Helen Clark doing that. She would have been off to New York and wanting to announce it herself. So he devolves decisions a lot, and he's giving those parties space. Good on him for that in that respect, but it isn't leading to a really successful brand position for National.
What about then Chris Hipkins? Because we keep hearing things like he'll be rolled, it'll be Kieran McAnulty. How do you think he's doing, and is he the right person to potentially take Labour with some partners next year?
Yes, I mean, if you'd asked me closer to the start of the year, I would have thought that he was at risk of being rolled into the election with possibly the sort of replacement you talk about there. But as we head into the back end of 2025, you'd have to say that they'd be mad to roll him. I mean, if you'd asked Labour the day after the election in 2023, hey, how would you feel 2 years later to be level pegging with National and your leader to be on level pegging in the preferred PM stakes or even slightly higher, they'd say, you know, you're mad. I'd definitely take that deal. So based on those numbers, you'd have to say Chris Hipkins at the moment is incredibly safe. Look, that could change if things improve for National and if their tax and economic policies that we're starting to see roll out don't fly well. And I know there's a bit of disgruntlement about whether you go for a capital gains tax, which Christopher Hipkins, don't want to get my Chris's mixed up, supports, and the wealth tax, which some of the other people in the party support. So who knows what's going on behind the scenes there. But if he rolls that stuff out reasonably, then, you know, it looks like they'd be mad to roll him.
With the exception of, obviously, Jacinda at the helm when they went solo effectively, the Labour Party needs friends. But the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, they are not getting good headlines.
It's been another turbulent day for Te Pāti Māori, with a dressing down by Parliament Speaker for what he described as disorderly conduct. That came just hours after the party accused its own MP, Maria Meno Kapakingi, of financial overspend and made public allegations that her son threatened Parliament staff.
People are not feeling a lot of love for them. How problematic are they for Labour and their chances getting in?
I think you've hit on one of the key questions for any potential alternative left of centre government, and that is one of the biggest challenges that Chris Hipkins will face. Probably not so much with the Greens, although they have had a terrible year, losing a lot of MPs, but they have been in Labour-led governments before, and they are slightly a known quantity. Te Pāti Māori are a real issue. They're having their own huge eruptions at the moment themselves, and a lot of their ideas are ideas that are going to turn off people who decide elections in the middle, if you like, the so-called mythical middle New Zealand voter. And so I would have thought that at some point Hipkins is going to have to come out and say Te Pāti Māori won't be in the executive. I would have thought that was the cleanest way for him to deal with that. When you think about it strategically, Te Pāti Māori have got nowhere else to go, do they?
Well, Luxon has made it clear National doesn't want a bar of them.
They're not a serious outfit. They're an activist organisation that really doesn't have any answers to any of our challenges or opportunities that we have in this country. You know, it's Chris Hipkins that wants to work with that chaos, and I don't. Just rule them out.
There's just no coalescing of minds or spirit between those entities, so it ain't going to happen. So they haven't got leverage. So if he handled it well and he talked to them first and he said, look, you guys don't actually even really want to be in government. I mean, they've said they do, but there's a lot of downsides to that, especially if you're a more activist organisation. He could easily say, OK, we will give you certain funds for certain projects, but you're not going to be ministers in that government. I would have thought it's that sort of approach that you might need to take if he was going to try to blunt those attacks from the right, who will take every policy that the Māori Party has and say, oh, what about this? They're going to do these crazy things. And that can be quite distracting. So, again, I'm not sure quite how he's going to do that. That would be one option, but he's going to have to settle that. Otherwise, that will be one of the dominant strains of the campaign.
What about the coalition? Like, say, they've been doing pretty good up until now. Going into next year, there will be some egos in there, I say politely. Do you think they could form another government? Will they last that long? And going forward, could they last that long?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because remember, and it's difficult because so much happens in the world and people forget, but, you know, National and ACT were both saying neither of them could work or trust Winston Peters.
Exactly.
You had the Prime Minister coming out and say, hey, if you vote for this guy, Winston Peters, you might need to go to another election. Do you remember that?
I do.
So that was all going down. And then, of course, you know, you have to put that stuff behind you. That is the job of a politician. I mean, they clearly not on the same song sheet on everything and the personalities rub up against each other, but they've done a relatively good job of holding it together. As you say, in 2026, that's going to become harder. Mainly Winston Peters is the one to watch in some ways on that, because it's a bit like the life cycle of the butterfly. He has to go, somehow transform from being in government to campaigning. And usually that's campaigning against stuff. And he's done it incredibly well in the past. So look for signals, and it's already happening to some degree, where he is effectively campaigning against the government to get back into Parliament in sufficient enough numbers to possibly join the government again. Yep, it's slightly counterintuitive, but that's the kind of thing to watch for. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to campaign as a coalition. You know, certainly Winston Peters wouldn't want that. What's further complicating it is this idea that he said so far that he wouldn't work with a Chris Hipkins-led Labour Party. So that's interesting, because does that box him in? He's loved having the play both sides thing in the past, although he didn't do that in 2023. He has done that leverage game pretty successfully over the years. So that's another one to watch out for too. I mean, we've seen that Future Fund announced by Labour.
Labour's announced it'll be backing Kiwi ingenuity to help build the economy,
where they put the profits from SOEs in somehow to invest in New Zealand companies. And, you know, there's a lot of symmetry for the kinds of policies that New Zealand First likes. So is
Even
that a
though
little...
he called him, what was it?
He called it a Timu rip-off or something.
New Zealand First announced a similar fund at the end of last year. Today, Winston Peters dubbing the Labour leader Chris Timu Hipkins.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice little turn of phrase. But if your biggest criticism of a policy is, oh, that was our idea, then actually that
We're
shows...
more alike than you think.
Exactly. So, you know, watch that space and that relationship.
Oh, we're always watching Winston. What about these strikes? It's sort of these wave of strikes we've had this year, the mega strike.
There's good faith on our side. The unions are politically motivated. We get it. It's a massive disservice to their members, massive disservice to the kids, parents and patients.
When the government attack the unions in the way they are now, they're actually attacking the people on the coalface doing the work.
How problematic is that for the coalition government?
It is problematic. I mean, when you've got 100,000 people striking, and one of the biggest strikes in modern history, it's not great, and especially in big areas like health and education. It's interesting the government, and especially National, has taken this head on and decided to fight it. I mean, Simeon Brown has been very strong and hit back at them, and Judith Collins too has been deployed to say, hey, these guys want to discuss Palestine rather than teaching and children's issues and things and going after them. I wonder whether they might slightly have read that wrong. I mean, I'm not sure that there is a sort of visceral hatred or distrust of unions at this point in New Zealand. There has been at times in the past, but they're not nearly as strong as they have been. In the soundings you take from your own, you know, mates and teachers and parents and things, I don't know, a lot of people still have a lot of respect for teachers and healthcare professionals. So it's difficult. One day is not going to turn the ship anywhere into dangerous territory, but you wouldn't want a lot more of those, would you, as a government, especially as we head into election year?
Cost of living, though, how big a thing is that going to be next year for the government?
Oh, it's absolutely huge. It will be easily in the top 3 issues, if not the top one. And yes, we've had inflation slightly more back in the box, although the latest numbers show it right at the top of the Reserve Bank band of 1 to 3%.
Inflation continues to rise, now at a 15-month high, sitting right at the high end of the Reserve Bank's target of 1 to 3%.
So we're at 3%. And unfortunately for the government's narrative, inflation has been increasing now for the last 2 or 3 times. So they can no longer claim that they're pushing it down. And if prices are really high and they're rising by 3%. Well, they're rising from a high base. So, yes, the rate of inflation might have slowed, but prices aren't coming down, and especially on key things like electricity and power, which is a real big issue for the government. So cost of living has been the top issue, and I expect that to remain so as we head into next year.
He says healthcare and tax will also be big issues next year.
How Labor handles its capital gains tax will be utterly crucial, and we'll see this in a few weeks, and it's going to be really exciting. I'm a geek, but I'm into it. And
I love how excited you are.
I know, you can see it. I mean, I just love it. You know, I want to open the present right now and unpick the details. So you can see Labor trying to build this narrative of almost more sort of economic sovereignty, New Zealand first sort of style stuff, where they're saying it's got to be about investing in our own people and our own companies and stopping New Zealanders from, you know, giving up the ghost and living overseas. So that sort of stuff will be critical in terms of economic policy, but so also will be healthcare. You see it, and you see it in the rising number of New Zealanders who have private health insurance, that there is decreasing confidence in the public health system. That will definitely be a big one next year, as will the kind of configuration of the two coalitions, because we've kind of got a Mexican standoff really at the moment, haven't we, with three sort of on each side. And so I imagine the raw politics of that will be a big one too.
Oh, it's going to be good. What do you think most people want from their leaders right now?
I think we're really crying out for some vision at the moment. I really do. We're crying out for some vision about where New Zealand is. I mean, I've followed politics for quite a long time, and yeah, I can't recall a time in my recent history about the degree of disillusionment that's there, and you don't see either big personalities or big ideas coming through. That's why I think you're seeing a real fracturing of the vote, as we talked about at the top of this interview. So people are always after the same things with leadership. They're after bold ideas, well articulated by interesting people. You know,
you wouldn't think that was too much to ask.
You wouldn't, but it seems to be a tough trifecta to actually nail down.
If you were a betting man and we were to go to the polls tomorrow, who would you pick?
I think the most likely scenario is always nothing happens. In other words, I'd still put greater odds on Chris Luxon being the Prime Minister after next year. But there's a real possibility that it could be a one-term government, which is an extraordinary thing to say. We've had two one-term governments since the Second World War, 1957 to 60 and 72 to 75, both Labor governments. 72 to 75, Norman Cook died in office. The 57 to 61 was the black budget with Arnold Nordmeyer raising the price of durries and booze and getting booted out of office. In other words, it's very rare. And we've never had a one-term national government post-World War II. So for us to be talking, and I'm talking about a potential, 30% maybe higher chance of that. I mean, it's a real possibility. And in most cases in the sweep of history, you'd be laughed out of town for saying that. And at the moment, it's knife-edge stuff, isn't it? The polls are showing us that. It's the two blocks are completely on an even keel. So if I had to bet today, I'd say that National will be returned in some form, but there's a real possibility that they could be facing a one-term and out.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Guyon Espiner. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Alex Harmer. I'm Amanda Gillies. Matua.